What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Well, there's been a lot of talk recently about Nintendo and new hardware of some kind being revealed, but in the background for a couple of years now, there's been another strategy that Nintendo's been working on that I think could actually work to extend this generation even further. We'll talk about that here today. Also, we are going to be going over new Nintendo Switch Online games that were announced for the Nintendo 64 expansion pack, and we're also going to be going over Sony's PlayStation Plus premium service, as it appears some of those games have leaked out a bit early. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton, and if you're new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And we're going to start today with Grand Theft Auto 6, which, when this does get officially revealed, is going to be a massive, massive event online. I mean, take a look at Grand Theft Auto 5, one of the best-selling video games of all time. Yeah, GTA 6 is going to be something to remember when it first gets shown off. But it looks like Take-Two and Rockstar are very aware of where we are right now with the expectations. We can see this posted up on Push Square. Now, this is referring to an update that was released by Take-Two and Rockstar talking about Red Dead Online, and it really sounds like they're just moving a majority of the team away from Red Dead Online to help work on GTA 6. They say more than ever, the need to exceed players' expectations and for GTA 6 to be the best it can possibly be. I gotta say, I'm not sure how they exceed expectations for Grand Theft Auto 6. I'm kind of stuck, actually, with this concept, because the expectations for Grand Theft Auto 6 are through the roof into outer space. I mean, how long has it been since Grand Theft Auto 5 came out? Though that released on the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3. They have just basically been refreshing this game for, well, every other generation since then. The PS4, the Xbox One, the Xbox Series, the PS5. So it's going to be a long run since GTA 5 came out, and that entire way, expectations have done nothing to build. So I am very curious what they come up here with GTA 6 to exceed those expectations. Also, last year, one of my favorite games was Psychonauts 2, and we're finally getting a physical copy for it about a year later. Take a look at this over on Twitter from Double Fine. Physical releases here, and there's two versions. The first is the Motherlobe Edition. It is a retail version for Xbox and PS4 with extra art stickers, art card stickers, and a reversible sleeve. It's kind of cool. It arrives September 27th, 2022 for $69.99. This was kind of a sticking point for people because it's a PS4 game right there for $70. I mean, I guess the other side, you'd be like, well, it's an Xbox Series game, right, for $70. But I don't know, the pricing there, I understand why people looked at it and said, wow, that seems a bit off. But to follow that up, there's a collector's edition. Comes with exclusive pins for the Feast of the Senses, 2 exclusive posters, P2 and P1 on disc, so you get both Psychonauts games, which is cool. Downloads for the soundtrack and so much more. And they have it posted up, I think it was at the IM 8-bit, yeah, for $130. As for just the 2 standard editions, those are up for pre-order on places like Target. But I will admit, I saw 70, I was like, wow, okay, so they're going for that price tag then, even on a PS4 game. I think they're looking at this saying, well, it's been a year since the game came out. We're probably not going to sell a ton of these necessarily, so let's just go for that price point that has been worked more and more to be accepted at this point. But hey, there we have it. At least now, if you were someone who was looking to collect Psychonauts 2, which there are big fans of what's now become a series, you can pick it up here in September. Oh, and a real quick update, because a lot of people have been asking what happened to Goldeneye. We were kind of thinking Xbox might reveal it, then we thought, okay, Nintendo might reveal it. Neither of them did, but something is going on with this game because Rare keeps updating it and unlocking achievements. They're not doing that for free. People are being paid to work on it. Well, we can see this from Jeff Grubb, who says Goldeneye is still in limbo because of the war. He also mentions 1 versus 100's team lead left Microsoft. Jez Gordon did follow that up and say that someone has replaced the person who left here for the team lead at Microsoft. So that's 1 versus 100 still appears to be on. Goldeneye, though, still being in limbo due to the war, everything that's going on with Russia and Ukraine. Yeah, I think they're just trying to figure out and navigate this space, similar to Nintendo, as we see them with, Advance Wars still isn't out. I think they're going to try to get that out there before the end of this year, so it might just show up in December, and then they're just like, all right, we'll see you guys in 2023. GoldenEye is a bit different, because that seems like it's a collaborative effort between Nintendo and Microsoft, and then I believe another company, MGM or something. So there's a lot of people involved with this, so they're going to be I think, pretty careful all the way around as to when they can exactly release it. I'm hoping it's not too much longer, because the prospect of being able to play online with Goldeneye with some friends now would be really cool. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Nintendo and upscaling techniques. This is something we've talked about for a while now, where machine learning would be used in order to take lower resolution images and move them up to a higher resolution without needing necessarily the big hardware to push along a 4K or even an 8K image. I mean, upscaling techniques has become more and more prevalent now, just because of where we are in the gaming space, where I guess eventually we're going to move to 8K, but the hardware will probably lag behind even the displays, which you can pick up an 8K TV now. There's just not a lot necessarily to do with it. Well, we can see this here. This is over on Go Nintendo, where they say Nintendo patent aims to upscale low-res images via machine learning. And I want to point this out. This is the patent here. And this is one that we've talked about before. We talked about it last year. I remember specifically towards the end of the year, this had popped up and was making a lot of news articles pop up, because of course there was still that talk about a DLSS switch. Oh wait, here's Nintendo with a patent about machine learning and neural networks and stuff for taking a lower res. But again, we've talked about this before. It seems to keep getting updated, however, and in fact, most recently on July 5th. Now, the abstract here is pretty abstract, but it says a computer system is provided for converting images through use of a trained neural network. And in fact, they point out several examples, even like a 540p image getting pushed up to 1080p. And I still think upscaling techniques is what's going to become very important as we go along, because as they continue to advance throughout the years going forward, and like AMD's on board with it, NVIDIA's on board, obviously, with DLSS continuing to advance, it would work out for lower powered hardware, like maybe what Nintendo would be doing with these hybrid systems, which you can only do so much when you're running off of a battery or in a small form factor like the Switch, when it comes to jamming like power hungry chips in there that create a lot of heat. In that case, though, if Nintendo and NVIDIA do continue to work on something like AI upscaling or just bringing in DLSS straight up for it, that would help Nintendo be able to use less expensive, yes, but also less powerful hardware to achieve that 1080p or even 4K visual. And in some aspects, it could help with the current Switch now, if Nintendo does want this generation to go on for a while still. Remember, not too long ago, they said we're about halfway through the generation. I do wonder if Nintendo is even working to design their own use of machine learning for upscaling techniques so that they can get more out of the current Switch. I mean, really, people seem okay with the images that are being pushed out by the Switch with first-party title, like a Mario Odyssey or a Breath of the Wild. But as we go through the generation, and games, especially from third parties, continue to request more and more from the system with these more demanding ideas and every concepts for these games, it does become more difficult for the Switch to be able to run them, unless the game, I would say, is built from the ground up for the Switch. And it's possible Nintendo could be working to just develop this AI upscaling technique in order to make it a bit easier for some of these games to put out an image that doesn't look like it's just completely covered in Vaseline. I mean, we've seen them work with AMD's Fidelity FX before, and that's actually been tied into some of the development kits that they have used with their first-party games even. So it wouldn't shock me if Nintendo even worked to develop their own that they could tie in for use with the current Switch, and then eventually, yes, we get some sort of refresh Switch that might just use NVIDIA DLSS, but could be something that pushes us in maybe into 2025 or 2026 before we see that big Switch 2 and they break away from this generation. Because, hey, I mean, the Switch keeps selling, right? That's what people tell me. Hey, the Switch keeps selling. Why do we need a Switch revision? You're right. Why do we need a Switch 2 then if the current Switch keeps selling? But I think Nintendo is at least cognizant of what's going on with these AI upscaling techniques, and they'll keep working to develop this one in particular, I guess, through the patent, and I'm sure eventually we'll be seeing it pop up more and more, potentially if we do end up with a DLSS Switch of some kind. Next up, let's talk about Nintendo Switch Online with that N64 expansion pack, as we do have a new game heading into the service this week. We can see this over on Twitter from Nintendo of America. They say Pokemon Puzzle League is coming to Nintendo Switch for NSO Plus expansion pack members on July 15th. So later on this week, you'll be able to check out Pokemon Puzzle League. I saw some people online who seemed unfamiliar with this game. It's actually pretty fun. It's essentially a game where you have, yes, different Pokemon battle against each other, but it's done more in the sense of a puzzle versus game like a Tetris Attacks or Panel de Pon or something there. But the part that's really funny about this that I really remember about this game, because I had rented it back in the day. I never owned it, but it was a good game to have if you had people over, and we'd occasionally rent games and even at times systems. You could rent the Nintendo 64 system with like 3 or 4 games at my local store. But this one I remember because it had like a full motion video cutscene in the beginning, and it was like a section out of the anime that they made for the game. It was very jarring to see that, because not a lot of N64 games would be able to do that, have like a full motion video. It just wasn't a normal thing for the Nintendo 64. And that's the part that I remember the most from this game. Not even the game itself being played, just the fact that it had a movie that played earlier. Different times back then. Oh, and in Japan, they actually had a couple of other games that were added, which we can see this from Nintendo saying Custom Robo and Custom Robo V2 will be added to Nintendo 64 Switch Online. That also be on July 15th. Of course, the Switch is region free, so if you make an account that's tied into your NSO account that has the subscription set up for N64, you would be able to download these. Of course, there's no English option or anything, so you'll have to kind of go through it with Japanese text. But Custom Robo we did get on the GameCube later on. I have not played these on Nintendo 64. I have played Custom Robo on the GameCube. I don't know if I'll check these out necessarily, but it is interesting just to see the gameplay around it in the trailer. So, hey, couple of games here to look forward to if you do want to sign into the Japan eShop and pick these up. But otherwise, hey, Pokemon Puzzle League getting dropped in the service is a pretty good addition. And now it seems like Nintendo is set up, because those were the last 2 games, I believe, on the Japan side with their roadmap, to where they can just drop whatever, and there's no more roadmap or anything set up in stone. So hey, it's anyone's guess as to what's next. I'm currently crossing my fingers that they drop in Mega Man 64, because we got to get Mega Man Legends released somewhere. Next up, let's talk about Sony and their PlayStation Plus service, where they have 3 different tiers that they'll have to continue to update seemingly every month. So we have the Essentials tier, where like Arcade-ageddon and some other titles went in this month. Crash 4, that was a good one. And now we're kind of hanging out waiting to see what's going to go to the other 2 services. That includes Premium, which would have the classic games. Well, it does look like we had some of those titles leak out a bit early. This is from a source who's been pretty much dead on with a lot of the other things that they've put out there, but we can see a list. This was posted up by Push Squares from a user on Reset Era, Black Bait, and they have Stray, which we already know Stray is going to the service. And you know, the more we've seen of this game heading into its release, the more interesting it looks. Like I am actually thinking this is going to be a pretty good game overall. July 19th, of course, that coming out. And then they have listed Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade, plus the episode Intermission. That would be a pretty good addition there, with Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade going in. And then there's just a whole bunch of Assassin's Creed on the list, with Black Flag, Unity, Freedom Cry, the Ezio Collection, and then Saints Row 4 Reelected. Now, this, according to the user on Reset Era, is just a selection of the titles. There would be other ones going in, and yeah, there should be, because none of these are listed as like the classics, which Sony has mentioned they're going to look to add new classic games every month. And I kind of stepped back and realized something. We're getting like updates from all 3 companies now on subscription models every month. Microsoft doing their Game Pass stuff, Sony with their PlayStation Plus Premium, and Nintendo with NSO, whether it's N64 or Genesis. So there's just like constant updates going out with new content for subscription services now. But looking at the classic selection, I mean, they could pick anything. The library is so wide open, because they haven't picked some of those big titles like a Metal Gear Solid, that I feel like it'd be hard to disappoint right now. I mean, sure, they could pick something underwhelming, but when you have that vast library of titles to choose from, it's like, just pick one really good one. You can throw some like mid-tier, low-tier ones in. You know what I would like to see, though, is because we've had some stuff with Star Ocean now, of course, leading up to its release for this new title later on this year. I wouldn't mind seeing them take like Star Ocean till the end of time from the PS2, which I believe that has a PS4 version already on the store. Just drop that into the service. I mean, if they want to grab Mega Man Legends, sure, get that too. But if you have Star Ocean get moved in, that'd probably have some people check out the game, give it some nice exposure and advertising leading into a game that I think could use it. I would like to see the Star Ocean game that's coming out later this year, the new one, do well. But after what happened on the PS4 with Faithlessness and all, it just, I don't know. We'll see with that. But that would be my suggestion, is grab Star Ocean from the PS2, move that into the service. However, we should see some sort of announcement around this in the next week or so, leading up to the big release for Stray when these other games get added. So we'll keep an eye out for it. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about this odd set of events that all transpired and has now gotten to the point where Kojima Productions is considering legal action after Kojima's image was posted up next to a very tragic event that happened last week. We can see this over on VGC. Kojima Productions has threatened legal action against those falsely linking game designer Hideo Kojima to this week's assassination of former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Very tragic event that happened here. But from what I can tell, the way that this went down, it's obviously an issue with social media and the internet in general, because just false information can, really spread in minutes even. But essentially, the timeline of events that I've been able to gather is, we'll say on certain message boards, images of the person of interest with all of this was linked to Hideo Kojima just by putting images of Kojima next to the person. And from there, it would spread onto Twitter. And then there was a French politician who posted up images of Kojima alongside of news articles with this entire event, which once that happened, it started to pop up on different news stations all over the place. It was a very strange set of events here that just shows what can happen with the internet and false information spreading rapidly. Now, the politician did delete the tweet, but let's face it, at that point, it's out there, and there are a lot of people who saw all of that. But they did say, I naively took a joke for information. I didn't think we could make humor about the assassination of a man, but I was wrong not to check before sharing. My apologies to Hideo Kojima and to the fans of Metal Gear. But as I mentioned, Kojima Productions wasn't having any of this. Over on Twitter, they said, Kojima Productions strongly condemns the spread of fake news and rumors that convey false information. We do not tolerate such libel and will consider taking legal action in some cases. And if you're Kojima Productions, you're looking around on news stations and up on social media and stuff, and you have the face of your studio, Hideo Kojima, having his images placed next to this person of interest and all these events, and it's certainly something they would be looking at as damaging to their overall studio. And who knows? It could get to a point where people even believe that that's a thing, right? Who maybe aren't in tune with gaming or understand who Hideo Kojima is. They just see an image next to it and they're like, okay, I'll look into this Kojima person later on, but it must have been them. And that's just kind of the way it is with social media and the internet. Like I said, false information can spread so rapidly online, even if the source is deleted or found out as it being, in this case, just a meme or a joke in extremely poor taste. It's too late. The information's out there, and people will take it and run with it at that point. But I wouldn't be surprised if we heard more about how Kojima Productions is indeed pursuing this legally, especially against a lot of the news stations, who knows, maybe the politicians themselves. I guess we'll see as we go along here as to what Kojima Productions wants to do. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're taking a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday. We're asked, has 2022 been a boring year in gaming for you so far? 57% said yes. 43% said no. I brought this up because this is something that Sean had mentioned during the podcast. I even turned it into like an entire topic for the show there. Because of his video, people were kind of divisive on it. Like, yeah, this was kind of a boring year. And others said no. I think if you look at it so far, you could make a case for that, but I mean, Elden Ring was such a big thing. Horizon Forbidden West is an awesome game, and if you're someone who likes simulation racing, Gran Turismo 7, we got a really interesting take on the Pokemon series with Arceus, and now looking at the rest of 2022, I think June will be loaded pretty well with different games with, I mean, God of War Ragnarok and a new generation of Pokemon within about a week of each other, and then there's most likely going to be a couple of other games getting announced for that fourth quarter of the year. So I'm not necessarily on board of it being a boring year just yet. I want to see what the rest of the year holds, but I will admit it's been a bit of a slower, maybe quieter year is what I would say for the first 6 months. So we'll see how things go towards the back end of 2022. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day as you're seeing here. This is from King saying, I would love for E3 to return to its former glory, but I see that being hard after a couple of years of publishers realizing they don't really need E3 and can host their own showcases. Would they really want to go back and pay to have their own booth for E3 again? Also curious to see how it is going to coexist with Summer Games Fest happening around the same time. So the way I see E3 coming back to its former glory is if they really focus on it being a trade show first and this big consumer spectacle second, third, fourth, fifth, or not at all. The trade show aspect is something that cannot be emulated in an all digital space because the trade show side means that you have publishers, developers, you have these large companies like a Nintendo, a Microsoft, even like a Sony, right? They would come together and you would have talks happen in person in rooms behind closed doors, and like at times things will happen spur of the moment that can lead to some really cool projects like Starlink from Ubisoft with Star Fox being added in, right? I mean, there's probably a story about Mario Rabbids being something that was kicked around during an E3 at some point. Those are the kind of things that really will blossom from these trade show events. But it becomes more difficult for it to make sense to go to these when you have 10,000 tickets being sold to gamers, and then you have to consider, okay, how can we put on a show for all these people who, let's face it, are just going to wait in line for 10 hours at a time to play a game for 15 minutes. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here. Today was Nintendo seemingly developing this upscaling technique through machine learning. You think that's a way for them to extend this generation further than we originally thought? And then also, what about the Nintendo Switch online games being added with something like Pokemon Puzzle League? And then PlayStation Plus Premium. What classic games from the PS2, the PS1, or the PSP would you like to see added this month? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.